This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
A second half steamrolling of the Boilermakers next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deeper in the front. Waits for it. It's caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again.
Schultz just before Frizzell got him.
And the leaping interception by Woodson. Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good. He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Winner. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace, and thank you again for joining us this week. If you like what we're doing here on Michigan Podcast, please subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Click like on this video, and if you post comments, and we get a lot of comments on these videos each week, I try to answer as many of them as I can. We love interacting with you here on our YouTube channel. Also, you can subscribe on iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher, and you can leave us positive reviews there. If you don't like us, don't leave any reviews because that would hurt our feelings. But if you do like us, please post positive ratings and reviews. That helps us. Every little thing you can do to help us get the word out about what we're doing here to cover our beloved Michigan Wolverines is greatly appreciated, including if you just want to support what we're doing. You can go to our Patreon page there as well for Michigan Podcast and just support the time and effort that it takes the entire team to put this presentation together each and every week. And as a bonus to those of you that do support us, we give you exclusive access to my college football picks, 11-6, by the way, against the spread last week. I'm 3-1 against the spread so far in Michigan games this year. So you get access to those if you are a supporter of Michigan Podcast, as well as our exclusive instant reaction podcast after each and every Michigan game. So all of that is available for our Patreon supporters of Michigan Podcast. I want to thank our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast, also helping to get the word out about what we're doing here as well. You can follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Let us know what you think there. John Borton from the Wolverine is going to be joining us as we take a look now at the season, which is already a third of the way through, if you can believe it, plus a massive scandal breaking in college basketball that has some Michigan implications. We'll get into that and more this week on Michigan Podcast. But we begin with what happened on Saturday in West Lafayette, and I ain't going to lie, I was gripping, and I was gripping hard, right? You can kind of see my transition a little bit, right? So 2 weeks ago, after the struggles against Cincinnati, I was all Aaron Rodgers-y, relax, right? Last week, after the struggles against Air Force, I was all like, it's going to take some time, guys. The team's young, particularly on offense. It is what it is. It's going to take some time. Yeah, about the patience, relax, and it's going to take some time. That all was gone at halftime against Purdue. I was in 3 Mile Island. I was full-blown Chernobyl. I was gone. Done. Total meltdown. I ain't ashamed to say it, man. I thought we were going to lose. I think I even might have tweeted that, although there's no evidence of it. So if a tree falls in the forest, because I deleted that tweet because it was dumb. So there's that too. Yeah, but some of you were gripping at halftime of Cincinnati, all right, 3 weeks ago. It took me a while to get there, but at halftime of Purdue, yeah, I was all abandon hope, all ye who enter, looking for a short plank to take a long walk. But one of the things that I said at that time that actually did make sense in amidst the other gibberish I was tweeting at the moment is that the adjustments that were going to be made in the second half, if there were adjustments to be made, because we were seeing a lot of the systemic mistakes, and it led to our quarterback, Wilton Spate, getting knocked out of the game because of more abysmal pass protection from the offensive line, particularly running backs also not doing their job, chipping in. Hopefully there were some adjustments made there, because I really believe losing that game could have had negative trajectory for Michigan the rest of the year. And lo and behold, the adjustments made at halftime, this is why you're paying these guys this kind of money. Look at these numbers. Michigan outgained Purdue 290 to 10. 290 to 10 in the second half. Is that good? Yeah, that's okay. 290 to 10, guys. Then there's this number. Michigan outscored Purdue 21-0 in the second half. How many of you thought Michigan was going to cover that 13-point spread at halftime when they were down 10-7? You're lying. Neither did I. Right? Neither did I. And then this wasn't just a one-game trend. Michigan has outscored its opponents 80-14 in the second half this season. They've given up a total of 14 points in the second half in 4 games. And what makes that even more impressive, look at the style of offenses that Michigan has faced so far. Florida, West Coast offense. Cincinnati, a power spread like what they play at Ohio State. Air Force, triple option. Purdue, more of a modified air raid. 4 weeks, 4 different offenses. Second half, the same results. Nada. They got zilch, nada. And then I want to look at this stat. This is Drew Hallett from Maize and Brew tweeted this, so I want to give him credit where it's due. Look at these numbers for Michigan so far and this defense. Florida had 192 yards of total offense. That is its second fewest in 45 games. 45 games, by the way, you're going back almost 4 whole seasons. Cincinnati, 200 yards of offense. That is the second fewest yards gained by the Bearcats in 144 games. So now we've gone back more than a decade for them. Air Force, 232 yards. The fewest they've gained in 54 games. So now we're sitting at almost 5 seasons of play. Purdue with 189 yards. That's their fewest in 35 games. So that's about 3 seasons of play. That's incredible. Whatever they're paying Don Brown, he's underpaid. That's insane. Now, some are going to say, but Steve, Florida's on their 3rd quarterback. Cincinnati wasn't a good offensive team coming into the year. Air Force, like Michigan, had to replace 10 starters on offense, like Michigan had to on defense. And Purdue is, well, Purdue. You know, I mean, they haven't been good for quite a while. I actually think that plays more into those numbers. Put that graphic back up there for just a second so I can illustrate this point. Florida has not averaged 400 yards of offense for a season this decade. They're the only team in the SEC that hasn't managed to do that. So even though they've been mediocre to below average to poor on offense all this time, Michigan still took an offense that's not used to doing well. And they still did worse than they typically do, meaning there's a certain baseline of suck the Florida offense is accustomed to, and even by that baseline of suck, they were worse. Same for Cincinnati. And that stat for Cincinnati, that's more than a decade. You can't take anything away from that. I mean, Air Force had its fewest rushing yards since 2012. Okay, so I actually think that these are offenses that are typically not doing well. And even though they're typically not doing well, they still underperformed where they were at. Shows me even more, I think, that this isn't a one-off. Michigan's defense is just dominating opponents. What it's been looking for is an offense to complement its efforts. And John O'Korn, by the way, nice use of the 23rd Psalm for smack on Twitter the other day. O'Korn posted, "Thou dost prepare us a table for me in the presence of thine enemies." He posted that little excerpt on his Twitter page because the offensive coordinator for Purdue, a guy named Tony Levine, Tony Levine's last gig before he joined the Purdue staff, he was the head coach at Houston. Benched a kid by the name of John O'Corn before he got fired. There is some providence, some karma, some serendipity there. O'Corn's first real action to redeem himself is against Purdue with Levine on the other team's sideline. And at times, John O'Corn was sensational. He may have finally given Michigan the offensive identity it's been looking for. You don't have to be great. Just be competent. Make a play or two. The defense and the special teams, they will take it from there. So a huge win for Michigan. The bye week timed very well. A chance to go in, see if we can fix those offensive line mistakes that continue to occur. Let some other teams get beat up. You know, I actually thought this was a scarier game for Michigan than Sparty. Not that I think Purdue necessarily is that much better than Sparty. But, you know, Michigan State now, they had Notre Dame, which is playing a very physical running style last week. They have Iowa this week, who's always physical under Kirk Ferentz. And then they play Michigan after 2 straight physical slobber knockers. They're going to be pretty beat up going into the Big House a week from this Saturday. Purdue, on the other hand, was coming into this game with maximum confidence after the way they rolled Ohio, the way they rolled Missouri on the road, almost beat Louisville. So they had a lot of confidence. Michigan State's going to come into this game physically pretty beat up after playing Notre Dame and Iowa back-to-back. But we can worry about that next week. Now it's about, can we fix our own issues? And we'll talk a massive scandal brewing in college basketball. That and more with John Borton of the Wolverine next.
From Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette, it's the Big Ten opener between the 8th-ranked Wolverines of Michigan and Purdue. On 2nd and 7, pressure coming and getting home to Blau. He's ripped down by Devin Bush. Looking at a 3rd down and 5. Boilermakers bring heat and get home. And Spade still down. On 1st and 10, they go to the trick play back. David Blau trying to get away from Bush, but can't. Chris Evans takes the fake, and O'Corn hits Poggi out of the backfield. He lets it go against the blitz and has the tight end Sean McCune for a 1st down. Up to the 20. They throw the out route. McCune has a 1st down. Play action. O'Corn a deep drop. Hits the crossing tight end. Zach Gentry to the end zone. He's in. Touchdown, Michigan. Play action and a free rusher. Bush putting his imprint all over this game. Winovich helping him. Pressure coming. O'Corn in trouble. Stays on his feet. Tries to extend the play. A man comes free for a 1st down. O'Corn has time. It's McCune for a 1st down into Purdue territory. They toss it to Evans. He bursts downhill for the touchdown. O'Corn to throw. Into a tight window. It's McCune and a 1st down for the Wolverines inside the 20. O'Corn off his back foot. Floating one. What an adjustment for the catch by Zach Gentry. Good. Back to the ground and in for the touchdown. Isaac puts Michigan in front by 2 scores here in the 4th. O'Corn in the boot, slips a tackler, and another, lowers the shoulder, right to the 1st down marker. Evans has a hole and stays on his feet and explodes. Chris Evans to the house, touchdown Michigan. 3rd down, and Blau sack. Chase Winovich gets home with a 5th Michigan sack.
Hey, are you looking to put the ball in your court, your actual court? Then Sport Court of Michigan has you covered. From basketball to tennis to batting cages to hoops, if you need anything athletic in your backyard, give them a call. Based out of Michigan, ready to install your court sooner than you'd expect. If you're in the southeast Michigan area or in Ann Arbor, Tim Barnes will personally walk you through the process of having your dreams of a professional court in your backyard. Just visit sportcourtmi.com. sportcourtmi.com. Now, if you're outside of southeast Michigan, you need a hoop for your driveway or yard, he's got you covered there as well at monsterhoops.com. Monsterhoops.com, and they'll ship it right to your door. Now, if you go to monsterhoops.com, you mention Michigan Podcast, you're going to save $100 on a Monster Hoop just by mentioning Michigan Podcast. And if you mention Michigan Podcast at sportcourtmi.com, again, mention Michigan Podcast at sportcourtmi.com. You're going to save up to $1,000 on your backyard game court at sportcourtmi.com, depending on the package you select. So, monsterhoop.com, sportcourtmi.com. Check them out. Tell them Michigan Podcast sent you. Back here on Michigan Podcast, and we are joined this week by John Borton, the man, over at the Wolverine. And it's good to have you back with us, John. How are you, brother?
I'm doing very well, Steve. It's good to be with you, and it's good to be talking about a Michigan team that's 4-0 and making some people happy, even though there's been some bumps along the road.
Indeed. Let's get to that in a moment, though. I want to go off the grid because of the news breaking today. The federal government now, this is an ongoing investigation for about the last 2+ years in the Justice Department. So it's actually encompassed the last 2 presidential administrations. They have come out today. They're filing charges. They're putting other coaches on notice. They essentially put out an 800 number and said, it would be better for you if you called us before we call you. I think we are looking at the biggest scandal in collegiate sports history, engulfing college basketball. A lot of what we've known that has gone on, that has been whispered about, if not openly pontificated on message boards like yours for years, is now coming to light. I think it's possible Rick Pitino has coached his last game. I don't think he'll be alone. I think we're looking at a half dozen, if not more, SMU kind of situations in terms of this level of scandal in college basketball. John, what do you think?
Well, you certainly know that there are some teams and individuals in really, really big trouble, some programs in big trouble. And we've said for years, as you noted on our message board, we've talked about it. I mean, college basketball in many, many respects is as dirty as the day is long. And people have gotten away with it for a long, long time. If you are a Michigan fan, it's a great time to have John Beilein as your head coach, because he is, not by my reckoning, but by the reckoning of his peers, the cleanest head coach in college basketball. But that certainly is not the norm. He's way out there on the edge, and you've got all these teams that for a long, long time have been in the player procurement business and emphasis on business. So many stories of dirty dealings, and there are players that we frequently mention as this is not a recruitable player by John Beilein, and that's as far as we go with it, because unless you can prove things, and that's what we would always get. Okay, prove it. Sure, you say that because they aren't in the Final Four every year because they need to win more. Now prove it. Prove the fact that these guys are out there doing this stuff. Well, I think the federal government is about to prove some of it, because once they get into a situation where they have the power to have some control over people who may talk, that's when it really begins to explode. You've got, if it's just the NCAA, they don't have the subpoena power. They don't have, I think, sometimes the will to take down some of their top people. But when the feds get involved, then it gets really interesting.
Well, John, I mean, we saw this painfully as Michigan fans over 20 years ago with the Ed Martin scandal, and which began on a wintry night when an SUV with Robert Tractor Trailer and Mateen Cleaves turned over and started begging some questions. And then eventually the feds get involved, take Ed Martin to court. Chris Webber lies to NCAA investigators. I never took anything. Now but then they put him under oath at the threat of perjury. And now all of a sudden the NCAA has the breadcrumbs it's looking for. And we saw what it did to our program. We essentially did a 10-year probation. We didn't go for an NCAA tournament from 1999 until Beilein took us there for the first time in 2009. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. You're right. Now that all of this is going to come out, and these are assistant coaches that make good money, but they're not making the kind of money that I'm going to prison for you. And these aren't mob enforcers that are used to doing hard time. These are guys in wingtips that don't want to be Buttercup at the federal pen tomorrow. They're going to sing and sing and sing some more. There are multiple layers to this. I think there's a lot of puckering going on throughout college basketball coaching offices right now.
Well, I think that would be a great scenario for college basketball in a lot of ways. I know there are people that would say, "Oh no, you would take down programs and you would, hurt television revenue and you'd hurt ESPN and different things." But fine, do it, clean it up, because you are in a situation now where it has gotten so bad that when a Michigan under John Beilein makes a run in the NCAA tournament, it's almost borderline miraculous because of the way he operates and the way they, as clean as they are. Now, I agree with you. I think you're going to have some people that begin talking because they don't want to do that time. They don't want to, and they know. Everybody knows who's dirty, and people frequently talk about it, but they decline to give details because it's kind of that gang of thieves. I'm doing it, so I know you're doing it, and you kind of let it go. But now, if you've got that outside pressure, people are going to talk.
And just one last thing on this, John, to give our audience an idea of what this looks like in the real world. I was listening to Sirius XM this morning, and Rick Neuheisel does their mid-morning show, the old Colorado, UCLA, and Washington coach. And he was talking about when he got fired at Washington for taking part in an NCAA basketball tournament pool, and the school gave him a waiver in writing and gave him a memo of understanding that said it was okay by NCAA rules for him to do this, but then they fired him for it anyway when the NCAA said that wasn't the proper application of the rules. And so the year while he was sitting out deciding what he was going to do next, he called a local high school where he knew the coach there very well and said, you know what, I just want to stay in the game. Can I come? I'll coach the line. I just want to be a part of a team. Can I come coach your team? And the coach said, yeah, we'd love to have you. Obviously, you're a good college football coach. You can help our kids. And there was a player on the team by the name of Terrence Williams who went on to become a lottery pick in the NBA. And he was on this football team. And one day, Terrence Williams, he said, came to him and said, hey, can you give me a ride home from practice, coach? And Rick said, sure, I'm happy to. And so he has him turn onto the interstate, and then they just keep driving and driving and driving. About 20 minutes into the drive, Rick says he looks over, Terrence Williams is asleep in his front seat. And he nudges him awake and says, hey, kid, I think I've missed your house. You got to tell me where you're going. He goes, oh, where are we at? And he told him, he goes, oh, no, we got another 15, 20 minutes to go yet. He lived 40 miles away from the school, John. And the reason he lived 40 miles away from the school is because a shoe company recognized him at 15 and 16 years old as a potential future lottery pick. And they placed him at this high school 40 miles away from his house so they could help place him somewhere else in college later on to set him up for his NBA career. That's an example of what we're talking about here.
Oh, there's no doubt. These guys are identified early. With basketball especially, you can project kids 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, certainly. By the time they're that old, you can see those skills that are going to continue to develop and translate. And they get advisors, and they get hangers-on, and they get all the people that are going to line their own pockets one day, or at least hope to by, okay, I'll develop this relationship, and one day they will hit it big and take care of me. Well, you know, it's just a system that is really, really rank, and you know, it may be. I have a little bit of I'll believe it when I see it to this, because we've gone so long with a system that, you know, you think there'll be a lot and then there's a little, but this sounds like it's pretty big scale. So I'm hopeful, honestly, that this will bring a lot of people down and a lot of programs down, so that in the long run this thing gets cleaned up.
John Borton from the Wolverine is our guest this week on Michigan Podcast. All right, let's switch gears, get to the game against Purdue on Saturday, which was a popular upset pick for a lot of the college football intelligentsia. But Michigan, the final score ended up being a comfortable win, a dominant win statistically in the second half. Now, I don't know what you were thinking at halftime. You're more of a grizzled veteran than me. Okay, and so I've learned the last few years, I don't tweet too much during the games, much as I used to. I don't jump on the message boards during the games, much as I used to, because I just get too emotional, and I say and do a lot of things I end up regretting a little later on. All right? But at halftime on Saturday, I really believed, based on what second half adjustments were potentially available for the offense and the way this game was going, I just had the sense this felt like a trajectory game to me. That if they weren't able to make some adjustments that changed the offensive trajectory that had been going on now for 3 straight weeks, if you count the first half against Purdue, I was really concerned about where the rest of the season might be going given where they were at. And I don't know if you thought that was a little over the top, but lo and behold, they made some huge adjustments, went to a spread passing attack, essentially abandoned trying to set up the run to pass, but went inverse of that, loosened up the Purdue defense, and outgained Purdue 290-10. And now I kind of think that this sets up Michigan very well for the rest of the season. Maybe they found something in that half. Maybe they found themselves a little bit, somewhat of an identity. But what do you think, John?
Well, I think a lot of what you say is true, but I will tell you at halftime on our message board we had folks writing this one off. This was a loss. I was looking at it, having seen a lot of first halves go awry and Michigan come back, knowing that there was a chance, certainly. But the way the offense was playing, you thought, oh my, the defense almost has to score to get this thing going, because Purdue, once the defense adjusted, Purdue wasn't going anywhere. 10 yards in the second half as we saw it play out. But you still have to be able to score yourself. And as much pressure as Purdue was putting on, Wilton Speight was under all kinds of fire till he went out. And then you've got John O'Korn coming in. You didn't know exactly what you were going to get out of him. I knew going in that Michigan wanted to use the tight ends more. We hadn't seen that much in the first half with Wilton Speight because he was under so much pressure and he didn't get it to him. But once John O'Korn started rolling and they were throwing more on early downs and they were looking for those tight ends, and he was able to buy some time with his feet. And I think that made just an enormous difference. Not only for him to extend the play and have more time to throw, but some of those plays really gave an opportunity for wide receivers and tight ends to shake free just that little bit more to get open, and they really got it rolling.
So what happened here, John? Because a lot of fans are like, they watched that second half. That's probably the best quarterback. Now, I thought Wilton Speight played very well in the second half against Florida State in the Orange Bowl, especially when you look at it was an Ole offensive line in the first half, and he got pummeled in that game as well. But a lot of fans, take the Orange Bowl aside, are going to look at this half and rightfully say, this is the best a Michigan quarterback has probably played since Maryland last year, which was the last game before they went on the road and when Speight got hurt at Iowa. And they're going to ask, why wasn't he playing all along? I mean, this was a dramatically superior product to what we've seen so far under Wilton Speight. Is that fair? Is it that the coaching staff acknowledged up front with O'Korn in the game, more of a traditional pro style, sit in the pocket, go through your progressions? Speight was already struggling with that, and he's more suited to it than O'Korn, that they just decided we're going to abandon that and right away put a scheme around him that'll make him successful and let him use some of those improvisational skills? Was it just O'Korn just showed some pocket presence that he's never shown, not even in the first game against Florida? I mean, he had one good pass that he threw up, but other than that the two drives he was in, we saw the same thing we saw in the Indiana game, John, where, look back, my first read is in there, take off, So what happened here? Why did this work and shock everybody?
Well, it did shock some people because, as you mentioned, people are looking at it now and seeing the best game since. But some of those same people last year in November were saying, we've seen the last of John O'Korn. He's just not going to play again in any significant minutes. So now you've got a John O'Korn who worked extremely hard in the offseason, did not give up, did not figure. I mean, people thought he was going to leave, thought he was going to go the grad transfer route and play somewhere else. He says, no, I'm going to stick here. I love Michigan. I'm going to work hard and get better. And I think what he came to strike as a balance was this. He was getting out of the pocket too early before. I mean, his first instinct, as you noted, would be to bowl if he got under a little pressure. He learned to hang in there better, but then when it was time to create and run, he could move around a little bit in the pocket. I don't think this was a design thing for Michigan's offense in that game against Purdue, but it was John O'Korn showing the skills that he has gained and really worked on to balance the fact that he can move, but he doesn't have to take off and run right away. He would take off and spin out of a tackle and then go find a receiver. And that was just huge for him. And a really good it dovetailed nicely with the emergence of tight ends like Zach Gentry and the McCune kid. I think that at this point, Michigan is almost better with tight ends catching the ball than with the receivers, because Tariq Black, who I thought was their best receiver to this point, goes down with injury. Grant Perry did a nice job in that game, and they've got some people that can catch it at the wide receiver spots. But I think that that it really came together. O'Korn's ability to move and guys having that extra split second to get open.
So do we have a quarterback controversy now, John, or in your minds, or in your mind, given the way O'Korn may have bailed out the season, which, by the way, Wilton Speight once did this in Coach Harbaugh's first year. He came off the bench against Minnesota, a game that Michigan essentially had lost, and bailed Michigan out in that game. Remember, that's the first time we figured out whether his name was Speight or Speight was that night on a Halloween night up in Minneapolis. So there's history here with Harbaugh before, but at that point, though, Jake Rudock was playing well. So once he was healthy again, we went right back to him. Do we have a competition now, though? Is this O'Korn's job right now to lose, given the way that he played on Saturday?
I think Jim Harbaugh would tell you you've always got a competition, and I think that's healthy, and I think that's intelligent and smart for this situation. Now, with Wilton Speight, obviously he has had some struggles early in the season. Some of it relates to getting used to new receivers. Some of it relates to the continued issues on the offensive line. But given the same set of circumstances, O'Korn did better in his ability to move and create some time. So at this point, with everything going the way it is, it's upper hand O'Korn because he performed better. Now, if he goes out, say he starts the Michigan State game and he struggles, and then you've got people saying, well, why isn't he, what he was at Purdue? It's not the same against every defense and in every game. I like Speight as a pocket passer. I think that we've not heard the last of Wilton Speight by any means, and I think that once he gets healthy again, they are going to battle it out for the rest of the year. Two good things about that. You've got two guys that have been on the field in big situations, and if one has to come in relief for the other, John O'Korn showed you can do that and win a Big Ten road game. And for both of them, the biggest thing is they've got a defense that gave up 10 yards in the second half. Mm-hmm. That can help you out a lot and give you some comfort as you're trying to move the offense along.
First thing I noticed when O'Korn came into the game is I thought he was far more decisive than we've seen from Wilton Speight the last couple of weeks. But if you're more decisive and you bring more athleticism, that's going to mask some of your offensive line issues. But this is 3 weeks in a row now that we have seen teams pre-snap blitz us to death, and a lack of communication up front. I remember one exchange between Ben Bredesen and Mason Cole where one of them, I think it was Mason, looked at Bredesen with his hands up in the air like, what the heck are we doing out here? I'm sure you've seen it, John. There is some brutal video out there, coaching video out there on social media of our backs doing something that is allegedly called pass protection. Okay, but it's more passing on than protecting, including one of Ty Isaac that just, if I'm an NFL scout, that you got to be a great running back for me to overlook something like that come draft time. What's going on with the offensive line? There's a lot of money invested in the coaching staff. Greg Fry, who rebuilt an offensive line from nothing when Rich Rodriguez was here, and he was here with them before, to guys like Patrick Omame and Dave Mulk, who was the Remington Award winner, and Omame and Luan. These guys are still playing in the NFL. What's going on with this unit right now, though? Because we're not seeing it on the field, John.
Well, I think you've got an offensive line that you replaced three guys that were starters, three guys that had played many, many games up front, and now you have 60% of that offensive line as brand new starters. Yeah, you got a one very veteran guy in there at center, but he hasn't been in the heat of Big Ten games. I think that we saw between the week following Air Force and Purdue, it all bubbled up about they can't score in the red zone. They can't do this. They can't do that. Well, they scored in the red zone every time they got in there against Purdue. That was a heavy, heavy emphasis. They found ways to get that done. You got a bye week now, an improvement week, as Jim Harbaugh calls it, and it's a great time for it because you got some things to fix. And if you don't think that they're working on offensive line handling blitzes and just creating better holes up there and on running backs pass protecting, that's what I guarantee you. That's what they're going to be focused on, because there's a reason people again said Davion Smith, he doesn't run as well as so
right.
and so. So why is he in there? Well, he more often than not he helped Wilton Speight from getting his head taken off. And these guys behind, I know they've worked hard at it, but they've got to do it better, because I've seen some of the same video you have.
Yeah, that's a great point you made about the adjustments made in the red zone. In fact, if you could take all the stats from the game on Saturday, and I could probably boil the whole game down to this juxtaposition, John Borton of the Wolverine. Purdue was 0 for 12 on third down conversions offensively. Michigan was 3 for 3. All 3 are touchdowns in the red zone offensively. That was the game right there, right? That was it.
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, that and the fact that Purdue absolutely, this ties into what you just said, that absolutely wasn't going anywhere on third down or anywhere in the second half, 10 yards total. Once Michigan stopped those throwbacks, I mean, Purdue was using Michigan's own defense against it. It's the quickness and the ability to pursue. Michigan actually had to take a step back, slow it down, and say, hey, we're just going to lay back a little bit more. I liked talking to Devin Bush Jr. after that game. He said, we own third down. We own it. You're not going to, I don't care what you run, what you do. And maybe that's a little too much bravado in your first Big Ten game. But, hey, this is a confident bunch, and they did own third down in that game. If Michigan continues that sort of defense, it's going to go a long way.
The defense, John, when you consider, I think it's Mo Hurst, Kennel, and I think Chase Winovich, depending on if you count Brian Monet as a starter or not, depending on whether they're running a 3 or 4 man front. But those 3 guys are regular starters. They're the only 3 that's even eligible to be in the draft next year. Now, Hurst, of course, is a senior. Winovich and Kennel are junior eligibility, so they could come back. That means these guys are all back again next year. We're only 4 games into this season. You got to think, given all that youth everybody talked about all offseason, they're going to be a lot better at this in November than they are right now. We're going to have 8, 9 of these guys back minimum again a year from now. Heck, a lot of those guys that are the best players now, you mentioned Devin Bush, are sophomores. This is truly scary how good these guys are already are, but eventually even still could be, John Borton.
Yeah, you think about how much fun it's going to be to watch Michigan's defense over the next few years. And for people that love defense, and I'm one of them, I think it's exciting to watch what they're going to be able to do. You just look at like you mentioned, so many sophomores that are playing, so much talent. But the narrative coming into this season, remember, was Michigan lost 10 out of 11 starters, and they're going to be in real trouble. It's going to be a total rebuilding year on the defensive side of the ball. And I flat out saw Don Brown, the defensive coordinator, laugh his head off about that over the summer. Mm-hmm. And said, yeah, sure, yeah, we lost all these starters. Guess who wasn't a starter last year? Mo Hurst, Rashawn Gary, talent like that was rotating in. Tyree Kennel. So many of these guys got a taste. Jim Harbaugh himself said, hey, guess what? We didn't realize on draft day that we were going to have to replace all these people. We knew it before. We started working people in. And they had guys ready to go. And it's just remarkable. You wouldn't expect top defense in the nation in total defense after 4 weeks, even in the rosiest projection. But the fact of the matter is, they're getting it done. Don Brown's scheme is working. These guys have great confidence in it. They're running people in there that are very, very good, and it's only going to get better. You're absolutely right that it's going to be just better and better to watch over the years.
Final question for John Borton of the Wolverines. So, John, we are already a third of the way through the season, if you can believe that. It's amazing. It's the most wonderful time of the year, but once the season kicks off Labor Day weekend, you wake up and tomorrow's Christmas. That's how fast it goes by. But a third of the way through the season, John, as we look back on the things we thought we knew in the preseason, the things we didn't think we knew, that it turns out we did know, and the things we thought we knew that we don't know, a third of the way through, where are you at in terms of the trajectory of this team and what they can still accomplish this season? How has your perspective changed or not differed at all from what you were thinking going in?
Well, let's start with the defense, because we were just talking about that. It's better than I imagined it would be, even though I thought it would be pretty good. I think this defense is going to keep them in every single game this year, give them a chance to go into that Ohio State game again with the chance to get to the Big Ten championship game. I can see a slip up or two along the way. Some people think it'll be more than two. But I just see a defense that will keep them in it. The offense, not as good as I expected at this point. And there are a lot of things that go into that. I think the offensive line, we've talked about some of those things. It needs to progress. These backs need to get better in some ways. Certainly pass protection and things that we don't often. I mean, we're always talking about how well they run and what long runs they break and those sorts of things. The quarterbacks working in tandem with the receivers. I think that definitely took strides against Purdue, but that needs to continue to get better. There's a lot on the offensive side that needs to take a step up in the next few weeks, or you're going to be in trouble when you try to go into Penn State and Wisconsin and win in the back half. Special teams, we heard all along, we're not worried about that. They're going to be good. And you look at guys like Quinn Nordine. They gave him they gave him a bye week at Purdue because they were scoring touchdowns. But Brad
nothing against Quinn. I'm sure he's a great kid, and his parents are phenomenal. I was getting a little tired of hearing his name, though, John. I don't know about you.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. So they gave him a week off, and but overall, guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones, he gets pulled from one game because he's struggling with punt returns and when to catch it, when not to. He comes back the very next week and takes one to the house. You see the talent. You see how good these guys are and how quickly they're learning when thrown into this fire. I really think that this team will be in every single game it plays, largely because of the defense. And what happens from there, how much better these other elements get. How much better does the offense get throughout the course of the season? Do the special teams remain at a reasonably high level? Can you avoid the big mistakes? Can they stop turning it over? They certainly stopped it for the most part against Purdue. I think it's exciting, but again, you can't let this 4-0 get to your head too much, because this year, like last year, like many years, the schedule is more backloaded. To Purdue in the back half, to Wisconsin and Ohio State at the end. That's going to tell the story.
I'll tell you, I'm clinging on offense. I'm just clinging to this. I'm hoping this is like 1998. And for people that aren't old enough to remember that year, that offense with guys like Tom Brady at quarterback, Anthony Thomas at running back, who would go on to become the leading rusher in school history. You had Ty Streets, who played many years and was a Pro Bowler in the NFL, a 1,000-yard receiver. All three of the tight ends on that team, Jeremy Tooman, Aaron Shea, and Mark Campbell, all played in the NFL. I think the entire offensive line on that team eventually went on to play in the NFL. And there were some games on offense that year that were UGLY, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly, hey, you ugly, bad. At Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. Actually, that was the year Donovan McNabb. I was at that game. Came in and blew us out. Yeah, there was the game at the Metrodome that was like 9-3 or something, if you remember that one. I mean, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the last two home games of the year, we have Penn State and Wisconsin, who are both ranked in the top 10, and out of nowhere, everything just clicked. Well, Steve, they had Tom Brady. Well, we didn't know he was Tom Brady then. In fact, most of us wanted Drew Henson to be the quarterback instead. All right, so out of nowhere, the last 2 weeks, all of this talent finally clicked, and they were just, even in the game they lost to Ohio State that year, they put up, I think, over 30 points in that game, and they just came alive at the very end. I'm clinging to that, John. That's the hope I'm clinging to, is that at some point, 1 week, we're just going to wake up, and there's just too many good players, and then eventually they just put it all together.
Yeah, and you may be right, but I would say 98 had much more veteran talent with a little bit more behind them in terms of games played and things like that. It's not impossible. This is a very, very good group, and I will say this, that defense is the defense of 2017 is probably better than the defense of 98, given that you lost Woodson off that 97 team and some other guys. There's a lot of story to be told yet, but Michigan has given a lot of reason for hope early part of this season, even though there have been times when you thought, wow, like the first half of the Purdue game. We'll probably see some more of that.
Wow was among the nicest words I was saying during the first half of the Purdue game. Actually, I've got this like moral opposition to deleting tweets. Even in my day job, I typically won't do it just because I just think it's kind of the sissy way out. I will admit I went and deleted some tweets after the Purdue game because I was not handling the first half very well. I will own that. Yeah, but I don't think I was alone. I'm a victim. I want you to know I'm not alone. I'm a victim.
You weren't the Lone Ranger there.
No. John Borton of the Wolverine. Good to see you again, brother. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Always enjoy it.
Always good talking to you as well. We'll come back more on Michigan Podcast here in a moment. Our weekly Big Ten power ratings from worst to first, counting down the top teams in the Big Ten. I've got Rutgers at 14, although they nearly beat Nebraska. Illinois hosting Nebraska on Friday night. And there is Nebraska, which is trying very hard to get its coach fired at the moment. Northwestern at number 11, Michigan State at number 10. But I think these four teams just draw straws. Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern, to me, I think they're kind of the same team. It just depends on the schedule being favorable or not. Going through the rest of the Big Ten, here's how I see the top teams in the league. Maryland, I think, is at number 7. Huge loss for them. Kasim Hill, we don't know if he's out for the year or not, but that's why they got destroyed by Central Florida. There appears to be no more dangerous place in America right now than quarterback at Maryland. Minnesota at 6, Iowa at 5, with a tremendous Hawkeye Iowa-like effort, getting utterly dominated every place other than the scoreboard by Penn State, and still just one perfect Trace McSorley pass away from beating yet another top 5 team there in prime time. And then there are the teams that I think are clearly the class of the league: Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan, and I have Penn State number 1 until somebody beats them. Although I think the best unit out of all of those 4 teams is the Michigan defense. But to me, to be the man, you got to beat the man until somebody beats Penn State. They're number 1 atop my Big Ten power ratings. Now, if I had a vote in the AP poll, this is how I would vote for the top 25 this week. I put South Florida finally in there, Miami, Utah, which survived at Arizona, Louisville, Mississippi State, which got destroyed by Georgia, Notre Dame, NC State, which broke a 10-game losing streak to ranked foes. The Gators, that means Michigan now is the only team in the Big Ten that has a non-conference win over a ranked team at the moment. West Virginia, San Diego State, who's got 2 wins over the Pac-12, and that win over Arizona State looks pretty good right now because they just beat Oregon. Washington State, which I think is going to beat USC when they host them at the Palouse on Friday night. Auburn, Oklahoma State, which had a huge loss to TCU. Ohio State, Virginia Tech, which I think is a really good shot to beat Clemson on Saturday night in Blacksburg. And then the top 10, Washington, very impressive at Colorado. Wisconsin, Michigan, USC, TCU, with probably the best road win in college football so far this year at Oklahoma State, which brings us to the top 5. Georgia, which I thought just sent a message with what they did to Mississippi State on Saturday night. Penn State, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Clemson. That would be my top 5 if I had a vote in the AP poll. And if I had to turn in my Heisman ballot this week, I don't know what Saquon Barkley is, but whatever that was in Iowa City is not of this earth. I mean, that was just... that was last son of Krypton stuff and what he did at Kinnick Stadium. Baker Mayfield, number 2, and I struggle to come up with a third right now. So I'll give a little run to Rashad Penny, having a nice start, leading the nation in rushing, or thereabouts. He's close for San Diego State. And that brings us to this week's Twitter poll results. I asked, are you more or less confident Michigan can win the Big Ten following the 28-10 win over Purdue? 50% said yes, 50% said no. One Ohio State fan said, should your question be more or less? He got what I was trying to do there. Because I don't know that we know the answer to that. That was why I framed the question that way. So given the way I framed the question, the answer of 50-50 is exactly right. The audience, you guys nailed it. That's the exact right answer. This week's question of the week here on Michigan Podcast, Tostanow on Twitter, I think that's how that's pronounced, asks, do you think if Harbaugh had a player like Saquon Barkley, he'd still spread the ball around or ride him the way Penn State does? I think he would do the latter. When Harbaugh was at San Francisco, there wasn't a season when Frank Gore was healthy. He was not in the top 7 in the NFL in carries. Some years he was in the top 2 or 3. Toby Gerhart, when he was at Stanford, man, he ran him into the ground, right? Built the entire offense around Andrew Luck. So the reason we spread the ball around is because we don't have a player like Saquon Barkley. I think once we do, now, do I think we're going to give him those kinds of touches that Penn State did against Iowa, against the Cincinnatis of the world? No. But if we had a player like Saquon Barkley, I can promise you we would be inventing ways to get him the football. But since we don't, we got to spread things around a little bit more. That's going to do it for this week's Michigan podcast. Don't forget to support us on our Patreon page. You get my college football picks each and every week, as well as my instant reaction game day podcast following each and every Michigan game this season. So I want to thank those of you supporting us via Patreon. You can also follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. I want to thank our distribution partners at Detroit Sports Podcast as well. We will see you again. Yes, we will be here for the bye week next week. Go Blue.